I would like to introduce Daniel Bodonyi, who is a product manager at memoQ, and we'll talk about the memoQ roadmap. During the presentation, you'll also find some QR codes that you can use to scan the links that Daniel will be sharing. And like I mentioned earlier, we'll have a Q&A after this session as well, and you can use the chat to ask the questions. And now on to Daniel.
Hello everyone, my name is Daniel and I need to start with an apology. I couldn't get this wonderful virtual background to work, so I just wanted to introduce myself with the background of the real Budapest apartment. I joined memoQ as a product manager a little over a year ago, together with my colleague Adam, who can't be with us today because he has 2 kids, so his quarantine situation is a little bit more difficult than mine, where I only have to worry about my bad quarantine haircut. So I hope you can all hear me all right. Is the sound all right? And
yeah,
can everyone hear me?
Yeah, perfect.
Brilliant. So what I'll do now is I'll share my screen instead of my video, if you don't mind, so that I can be less self-conscious about it. And what I wanted to talk about today is basically to show you how we approach our job of product management at memoQ, which is basically about researching and deciding what features and enhancements will go into the future versions of memoQ. For those of you who attended memoQ Fest last year, some of the things I'll mention may be a little bit repetitive. So it could be a good time for a small break, but I hope for many of you these will be new and interesting. And what I wanted to start is talking a little bit about the why of these processes, and to ask you a question to begin with, which is, what do you think is the key to creating a great software product? And I won't be able to see the chat window right now as I'm sharing my screen. So if anyone wants to contribute, maybe unmute yourself. And I'd love to hear a few ideas on what you think is the key to making memoQ better. Creating wow experiences that are powerful yet easy to use. Jeremy, I couldn't have said it better. Intuitive usage from Diana. Yes, very much the case. I finally did manage to look at the chat window. Knowing your users and use cases, and the final user. This is pretty much our answer is as well. So we think that the key to creating a great software product is you, our users. And users have really always been at the center of memoQ's focus. I know this because in my previous life, which was some 15 years ago, I was the managing director of a small translation agency, which was actually one of the first customers of memoQ. So I've known the company and the founders for 15 years, and the main reason I joined memoQ last year is because I know that we have always agreed on this core value, that nothing can ever be more important to a software company than its users. And by the way, when we say users, we mean all of our users. So we mean translators, we mean translation agencies, we mean enterprises. We understand the language services industry as an intricate and interconnected ecosystem where if one player benefits, everyone benefits. If translators can work productively, LSPs and enterprises also benefit. If enterprise workflows are well designed, life will also be easier for translation agencies and translators. If agencies can thrive, translators and enterprises will be better off for it. So while there are certainly cases where interests don't align perfectly, we believe that in the long term, industry players can only succeed together. So when it comes to our product strategy, our goal is always to find ways to create value for our entire supply chain. And I think it's important to acknowledge here that we haven't always done a great job at this. We have made mistakes in the past, and we'll probably make mistakes in the future. So listening to our users' needs was a lot easier when memoQ was still a small company. When my translation agency, previous agency, started using memoQ 15 years ago, if I needed a new feature, I could just give a call to Gabor Ugrai, one of memoQ's founders, and the feature would likely be there in the next release. Now that memoQ is a global company, we have people from Toronto through Bonn and Budapest to Krakow and Tokyo. Listening to our users is a lot more difficult. So listening to users means now listening to tens of thousands of people in over 100 countries who have different and sometimes even contradictory needs and expectations. In practical terms, it means we receive around 700 new feature requests every year, out of which we are able to implement 5% or 10% if we're lucky. And while some of our users think that's too few, some think it's too many, so user preferences differ in that regard as well. And it has become clear by the time I joined memoQ that even though we have always cared about our users, our old processes of engaging with you no longer allowed us to respond to your needs as quickly and responsively and as transparently as we would have liked to. So we realized that as the company grows and our user base grows, our product management processes and our mechanisms for listening to you and prioritizing user needs also need to mature. So when Adam, my fellow product manager, and I joined memoQ last year, we set out to redesign these processes with our colleagues. And I wanted to give you an update about some of the things we've done so far, which is about the how we do product management. One of the things we had to rethink is basically our internal structure and processes. So we've created new roles and expanded our team to allow us to spend more time proactively soliciting and understanding our users' workflows and needs. And now these new processes include regular in-depth interviews with our users, of which we have done over 100 in the past year. And we have made these conversations with users really a regular part of our team's day-to-day. And if we haven't reached out to you yet, and if you'd be happy to share your thoughts and participate in an interview, please feel free to sign up to what we call the memoQ Design Lab, our dedicated core group of power users and early adopters who we first contact for feedback. You can sign up on our website by scanning this QR code on the slide with your phone's camera. Hopefully it works. And don't worry if you cannot scan it just now, the same QR code will show up a few more times during this presentation as well as on the last slide. Secondly, we also want to make sure that you have the chance to review and give feedback on new features, even before these features are released. So creating the memoQ Design Lab was an important step in this direction. And again, if you'd be happy to give us feedback on early prototypes, wireframes, UI designs of new features, and if you haven't signed up to the Design Lab yet, you can do so by scanning the QR code, following the hyperlink, and filling in the sign-up form. Thirdly, we've also begun to gradually launch a new memoQ idea portal where our users can submit feature requests, which you've always been able to do. What's new is that you will also be able to vote on requests submitted by yourself and others. At the moment, this is only available to a small group of beta testers, so we can fine-tune the workflows before we do a wider launch, but soon all of the Design Lab members will receive an invitation. So if you are a memoQ customer with a valid SMA and like to be included in this from the beginning, then please sign up to the Design Lab soon, because we'll open it up in the coming weeks to the Design Lab members, and then gradually to more and more people this year. And we've taken a number of other steps as well to improve the way we research and prioritize the development roadmap. I don't want to bore you too much with these at this time, but there's just one last point that I thought was important to mention, and that is transparency, which is very important to us, and it's one of the best ways to make sure that our roadmap is in line with your needs, because transparency can help provide an important sanity check. If despite all of our efforts, we still make bad decisions, as we inevitably will, this transparency can ensure that you can give us the feedback we need before those decisions impact the product and the user experience. So we've begun preparations for this, and we're gradually making our product roadmap more and more transparent, part of which is, I believe, this presentation. So with that last point, I wanted to move on to showing you a little bit of the what as well, to give you an idea of partly the principles that are behind product development at memoQ, behind these decisions that we make about which features to prioritize. And then after that, some of the focus areas and product goals we have for the next couple of years. If I go way over time, I'd like to ask my colleagues to feel free to stop me. I'll just go on chattering about these very interesting principles, and then please let me know when it's time to move on to the last slide.
Sorry, Daniel, we have time. Please carry on.
Brilliant, thank you very much. So the first of these principles that we already touched upon is the ecosystem view, and this basically means two things. On the one hand, it means that that rather than just looking at specific customer segments or industry verticals, we always strive to look at the entire language industry ecosystem and the supply chain. So when we decide what features to build, we try to make these decisions with the goal of finding the best opportunities to make sure we expand and grow the size, the capabilities, and the versatility of the entire supply chain. So that sometimes means we do even counterintuitive things. One of the things we are discussing now is about this plugin we have, for example, to allow SDL Trados Studio users to access memoQ TMs from Studio. And one feature of this plugin is that our customers may actually end up buying fewer memoQ licenses if they use this plugin, which looks like it could be bad for us. But another important outcome is that our server customers have access to a broader pool of vendors, which comes in very handy when you need translators for an urgent job in a niche domain and language pair. So the ecosystem benefits, and by striving to be the best at adding value to the ecosystem, we believe that we ultimately also benefit. And on the other hand, this ecosystem view also means that we believe we can add the most value by focusing on what we are best at, rather than trying to be everything to everyone. So the language industry uses many different types of technologies, and there are many different types of players in the field, so to speak. So our approach to this type of complexity is to work with partners such as MT providers or companies like Plunet and XTRF, who already deliver the best business management systems for LSPs. So our job is to integrate with them seamlessly. Another important principle is about managing complexity. So in our view, complexity is an important driver of our industry. This is something that we cannot get rid of. We cannot simplify complexity with automation. We can only automate complexity itself. So we see this type of complexity as a necessary aspect of the supply chain. It's a necessary feature, not a bug. And what we want to be the best at is basically helping customers manage this complexity in a way that makes things usable. The third important aspect is even as we fight with this complexity lion, and we've developed this product that's really quite mature and complex now, we have to make sure that this complexity will be sustainable, so that you can use this technology 10 years from now and it stays current 10 years from now, and that we don't break compatibility, we don't break the supply chain, we continue to be reliable and scalable, because our goal is for every customer who joins our ecosystem to see a return on investment. And that means that our customers tend to grow quite quickly. Some of our customers double their volume every couple of years. And as our customers are growing, so too our systems need to grow. And finally, the last principle I wanted to mention is that of augmented translation. So we have an overriding belief that AI and specifically machine translation won't replace humans and existing technologies such as translation memories in the localization process, but will augment humans' capabilities and existing technologies. So this is something that we believe very strongly for many reasons, which we don't have time to go into today, but this is also an important driver of our product decisions. And what does that mean finally for our roadmap? So in the past year, we've identified 8 product development focus areas and 27 different product goals that we want to deliver in the next couple of years, about half of which we are already working on. So these are sort of the things that are on our roadmap for the foreseeable future. Of course, we always welcome feedback and we always welcome suggestions, and what we want to achieve is to stay flexible, but also transparent and predictable enough so that you can make informed decisions about things such as, do you want to upgrade or do you want to switch to memoQ? If any of you are interested in specifically one of these 8 areas, I'm very happy to answer questions about them. With that, I think it might be time to move on to any questions you might have.
Hey, Danny, why don't you put the QR code up again for anybody who wants?
So let me just show you the last slide. Here you can see my email address as well as my fellow product manager Adam's email address. We're always happy to hear from you if you have feature requests or enhancement ideas. And here is the QR code again, which you can scan and sign up to the Design Lab to be involved in all of these initiatives.